Hi guys, Dave here from Wolf in the Wild Survival, back at my little bushcraft camp, and holy jumpers, is it getting popular. Now I first came out here, I think it was probably 5 or 6 years ago. I started putting together, little, like a chair and little bits and bobs and like a bench, and I did the fire pit and whatever. Well, somebody has come along and started to build like a debris shelter kind of idea, and somebody, maybe the same people or not, I don't know, dragged a picnic table out here. So it's becoming a popular spot. And I mean, a really, really good thing is that so far, at least, they're keeping it pretty clean. There's no garbage laying around. There's no beer bottles or cans or anything like that. So that's pretty awesome. Okay, so for today, as you know by the title, we're going to talk about sleep systems. Particularly why I don't like sleeping bags. Now, for the most part, it's really a matter of personal preference. It kind of is. But the way I do my sleep system is it's got a logical, kind of platform to it that I will explain. I'm going to get into the bag here, and I'm going to start kind of taking things out and talking a little bit about my process. So let me get this started, and I'll get back to you in just like 2 seconds. Okay, I'm really hoping that the wind isn't being picked up on the camera too much. I kind of came far back into the woods to try to cut down on wind and noise from the roads, because unfortunately I wasn't able to get back home up to Muskoka, so I am where I live in London. So, okay. When you are preparing for something, when you're in a climate where, like a temperate climate like I am, a lot of survivalists will tell you, layer up on clothing. You can always take layers off or add layers to, as long as you have them available to you. So you want to have like a pair of pants and a short sleeve shirt. Then you want to have like a warming layer that you can put on underneath, or if it's already cold or already on, then a long sleeve shirt, and then something like a nice warm hoodie or a jacket or something or other like that. And if it's, you start to get a little bit sweaty, you can take that layer off and put it into your pack, tie it around your waist, whatever, and you can regulate your body temperature that way. And then, in the very next video or even the very next sentence, they're unrolling a sleeping bag, which is just one constant layer. Now, I do own a sleeping bag. I have a pretty good one. It's a Teton. It's good for down into fairly cold weather. It's a bit much for the summertime. Personally, after a little bit of experimentation, I don't like sleeping bags, so I don't have my sleeping bag with me. It's packed away somewhere. I never really use it, but I do have it just in case. So, okay. I have four parts. I have a rain poncho. This is a military sil nylon ripstop rain poncho. Then I have a poncho liner. and I have a casualty blanket, and that's usually good enough. But when it gets really cold at night and you want a little bit of extra, you cannot beat a wool blanket. So if I were to go camping tonight, I would have the wool blanket. If I were to go camping mid-June, July, even into August, I probably wouldn't bring this. It is big, it is bulky, it's got a bit of weight to it, so if I don't need to carry it, I won't. But I will always have this here. Now, the rain poncho is a rain poncho. It's good to somewhat keep you dry when it's raining out until you can get under cover. So this is multi-use. The poncho liner, it is kind of multi-use. You can use it underneath the poncho for a warming layer, but it doesn't have like a head hole. So it is multi-use, but it's for warmth. Now I have put some extra ties. I've sewn some extra ties to either side using paracord, and it adds another use to it. So if I have my hammock, I can use this as an underlayer for my hammock, like an underquilt for my hammock. So if you have a poncho liner, put a couple of, like there's a tie on one side, tie on the other side, tie in the middle, put extra ties in between all those ties, and that allows you to tie it all together, and it makes a pretty good hammock quilt, and it works fairly well. So you don't have to carry a hammock quilt, especially if you have another blanket. You don't need this in the hammock as a blanket. And then the casualty blanket, I mean, that's just good for all kinds of stuff. It's probably about as multi-use as the rain poncho to some extent. It's really limited by your imagination, but it could be a pretty good shelter, similar to that. It could be a ground cover. It's an invaluable piece of kit, I find, to have at least one in my camp pack. So I'm going to bring the camera in, let you guys have a look at everything that I've been showing you, and then I'm going to do a little demonstration. Okay, now as I was talking about earlier, rain poncho. Now the grommets are, on this particular one, are a little bit close to the edges for my liking, but I mean, it's held up pretty good so far, so I can't really complain. But this is kind of a lightweight item, and it probably won't stand up to heavy use in heavy winds. So it's not the greatest option for a tarp shelter, in my opinion. Now, the casualty blanket can also be a pretty effective tarp shelter, and the grommets are much better placed on this particular model. Once again, these are not really heavy duty. They probably won't stand up to hard use. The Arturos are probably the best, but it's still pretty good to have. And then I have my poncho liner that I probably should have taken out of the bag before I started this. And as you can see, there's the tie-out points, but there's also the paracord that I was talking about. And these things are actually pretty warm. Like, for the most part, when people normally go camping, this is really all you're going to need, all in all. But it's good to have options. It's good to have layers. And like I say, the wool blanket, this is, it's a little bit thin than some of the really good wool blankets. I kind of got this on sale, and it's not bad, but in colder weather you'd want something a little bit thicker, probably. But live and learn, right? This is why we get out and we practice and we use our gear. This sleep system, it can be used pretty much anywhere, all in all. A sleeping bag generally is more for a tent. You can use them in hammocks, and you can use them on the ground too, I suppose, with a little bit of extra gear, especially like a casualty blanket in certain situations. But the versatility of this sleep system is really, you know, where it shines above and beyond your typical sleeping bag. And it's another reason why I prefer it. A lot of people nowadays, they like to have tarps, and they make tarp shelters. All in all, maybe it's a fad, maybe it'll go away in a few years, who knows? But it is a really good option to have in your camp pack. Even if you have a tent, you should have a 10 by 10 sil nylon tarp. It's so useful. If your tent happens to break down, malfunction, something goes wrong, if it springs a leak, you cover it up. There's so many uses, and this video is actually not about tarp shelters, because that's a whole bunch of different things. It's a whole different video. But I just wanted to iterate that this sleep system really shines when you're using tarp shelter setups, because the majority of tarp shelter setups don't have a floor. And that's kind of important. If you are in a sleeping bag on the ground, your sleeping bag is going to absorb the moisture, you're going to get wet, and then you've got problems. Okay, now I think I'm going to set up kind of over here. I was kind of hoping for more leaves to be on the ground right now, so that I'd have less dirt throwing all my gear into at the moment. But it's not like it hasn't been dirty before, so okay. I'm going to set up over here and show you guys the long and short of it. As I said, you know, just a minute ago, I'm not going to set up a tarp shelter. I'm just going to set up the sleep system. You can envision any kind of tarp shelter that you want, any kind of tent, or, you know, whatever. So you're going to start out with the rain poncho. Undo the snaps. This one is fairly new. I had a different one. Most of my gear is like olive drab. The other one was more of a desert camo. So I just got this not that long ago, and I replaced the desert cam. I like it a lot better. Doesn't really matter what color it is. Okay, so I'm gonna pull the hood closed, just to help keep everything inside dry. And I'm going to spread it out on the ground. All right, next is your casualty blanket, survival blanket. I don't know. There's a bunch of different names. You want to have that silver side up, because when you crawl into it, that's the heat reflective part that's going to keep you warmer if it's this way instead of flipped over. in cold weather when you need a little bit more R value. Next is going to be your wool blanket. If it's not cold, you're not going to use the wool blanket, so just obviously skip this step. I have done this in a tent as well. It's a little bit harder to get everything, you know, kind of nice and spread out and even or whatever, but it's still viable. It still is fine. And then, lastly, is your poncho liner. Now, you could, theoretically, tie all this together, except for the wool blanket, but, I mean, whatever. You could tie it all together through the grommets and the tie-out points from the poncho liner. I'm not going to do that right now, but it just helps keep everything together. So at this point, I would go tie everything through the grommets and you know, have it all put together nicely. So in hindsight, I tied all of the corners together because it's just a whole lot easier when you're getting into to throw the blankets over you. So I tied them all, even though I said I wasn't going to. I should mention, part of my sleep system is also one of my inflatable camping air mattresses. I use the Climate air mattresses generally, V-Static, I think they're called. It says it's got an R value of 4. Exactly what that means is pretty suggestive in the industry, to be honest. And the air mattress would probably go in between the rain poncho and the casualty blanket, unless the ground is really sketchy, in which case it'll be in between the casualty blanket and the poncho liner, or in this case, the wool blanket and the casualty blanket. So I don't want to have my air mattress on the ground. I want it to be as protected as possible. The rain poncho will help keep everything dry. All moisture from the ground will not necessarily seep up into the rest of your stuff. There probably will be a little bit of seepage wherever there's an overhang, and there will be overhang generally unless you customize it yourself. So it kind of helps with that as well. And I mean, I'm 50 years old now, so if I'm not in a hammock, I have my air mattress like pretty much all the time. So bear in mind, part of my sleep system does include my air mattress. Okay, now I hope you can see. I don't know if I set up the camera right. I'm 6 feet tall. I've got plenty of room. Absolute plenty of room. Okay. I also have an inflatable camp pillow, which I would have like right here. And then I could just oh, what did I do? There we are. See, it's comfortable, it's warm. If I get too hot, I can always remove layers. If it starts raining and the tarp shelter doesn't completely stop all the rain, it's hitting the rain poncho before anything else generally, so you'll stay drier. And it's not a down-filled sleeping bag. It's not a polyester-filled sleeping bag. This thing here, okay, this is a windproof and, you know, generally waterproof shell. Stopping the wind from moving across through your gear, across your body. Okay, I'm getting hot. Oh. Stopping the wind from blowing through your gear and moving across your body is going to decrease the amount of heat that you lose. So it does actually increase the R value of your sleeping setup here. Just not because of loft or insulative quality. It stops what is it, convection, or it stops the wind. The next layer, kind of the same thing. It's waterproof. It windproof, you know, the whole nine. But it's also got that heat reflective side to it that helps to hold the heat in. I'm sure we all know about the insulative qualities of wool. Even when it's wet, it still has insulative qualities. Cotton will not do that. Cotton takes forever to dry. Wool is a better way to go, even though it is a little bit heavier. It's just a much better way to go. And then you have your poncho liner, which, I mean, you know, it's got a little bit of loft, it's quilted, it's got a little bit of, it can shed water. It's not waterproof by any standard, but it is a little bit water resistant. But it's got some nice insulative qualities as long as you're not camping in the dead of winter. In the dead of winter, you're probably maybe gonna want something a little bit, you know, a little bit more than this. But I mean, if you camp the way I do in the wintertime, where I build sort of a little raised shelter and a platform and then a tarp right in front of the campfire, then this is perfect. You don't need anything beyond this. You stay pretty warm just with the fire. So I don't sleep in a tent when I'm winter camping. I don't know why anybody would. I want to have the fresh air, but I want to be close to the fire. I want to be able to like have some firewood underneath my raised platform, so that when I wake up, the fire's starting to die down, I just reach underneath and I throw the firewood into the fire pit, which is a good step away from where I'm sleeping. You don't even have to get out of bed unless you have to go for a pee or something, but on that, you don't have to get out of bed all night long. You just stay covered up, keep the fire going. It's way better than sleeping in a tent. Unless it's a hot tent, then that's pretty cool. So, this is why my videos are so long. I get on these rants that talk too much. So, I like this a whole lot better than a sleeping bag because of its versatility. I can just take 3 layers and then make a shelter out of the casualty blanket. I can use this as an underquilt for my hammock and this as my blanket, and still have my rain poncho just in case it starts raining, or I can have it as a tarp over top of my hammock, in which case I might need a little bit more cover, and that's where the casualty blanket comes in. I can kind of double up and do that. So if I'm in a tent, you know, I just spread it out on the floor and I just go to sleep and, you know, cover over the way I just did. If I'm under a tarp, I do the same thing. It's very, very, very versatile. Whereas if you use a sleeping bag, then you're going to need a summer sleeping bag, you're going to need a winter sleeping bag, you're going to need a fall sleeping bag, and you're going to be shifting things around here and there and whatever. Whereas with my camp pack, my rain poncho is always in the camp pack. The poncho liner is always in the camp pack, and so is a casualty blanket. The only time I switch anything out is in the wintertime. I put in, or not the wintertime necessarily, but in the fall when it starts to get cold at night, I put this in my camp pack so that I at least have it if, you know, for whatever reason I need to grab and go. I'll take it out when the weather gets warm, but I'll keep it on hand, you know, somewhere nearby, just in case I have to grab and go. But it does take some weight out of the camp pack for the summer when you're going to be, you know, hot, sweaty, and, you know, you don't want to have all that weight. You don't want to have all that weight any of the time, but when it's necessary, it's necessary. But you got to remember, ounces equals pounds, and pounds equals pain. So you want to keep your camp pack as light as possible. You want to have the things in it that you are going to use while you're on that particular trip. Bug out bags are a kind of the same, but kind of a different thing, where you have all that stuff there and it's always in there, and it just weighs whatever it weighs. And some of those actually can get fairly heavy. People, they tend to over prepare a lot of the time, and my camp pack is kind of my bug out bag, but I have the versatility that, you know, if I go into an area and I have to, you know, spend the night or whatever, if I want to be up off the ground, I can. If I got a little tent that I can pop up and, you know, kind of whatever. I got the tarp shelter, the 10x10 tarp that I can make a shelter out of. The whole thing is very, very, very versatile. If you're just running around with a tent and a sleeping bag, you have basically that one option, and you're kind of stuck in that niche. And I mean, I'm also like over 200 pounds, guys. I'm a bit of a fat guy. I don't like sleeping bags because of how restrictive they are, and part of that reason is because I'm so big. So if you're, you know, like a skinny little dude, tiny little woman, sleeping bag probably wouldn't be all that bad for you. But if you tried this and, you know, you kind of adjusted it to your needs at the time, I'm sure you would prefer this over a sleeping bag. So hopefully I didn't talk too much. Hopefully it's not going to be a boring video of me just blah, blah, blah. But maybe I'll edit some stuff in. I will see you guys in the next one. Until then, stay wild.